Hey there, this is Chad from Zombie Fight Shark. Welcome to episode 6 of our Grain Complete walkthrough. We are now to one of the most exciting parts. It is the playback algorithms. The, some might say the engine behind the whole thing. What makes this such an exciting synthesizer and so cool, and you can do weird stuff. So if you've missed the other episodes, we have covered everything else on the front of this synthesizer, the modulation matrix and filters and amp, and the last episode was about the sample section. So, and we've covered the effects. So if you missed all that, go back, check it out. We will be tying all this together in episode 7. We'll talk about the back real quick because it's pretty simple on this one, and then we'll tie together all of it into a patch and see how it all works together in a really interesting way. So let's talk about the algorithms. So we have 4 to choose from: Spectral Grains, Grain Oscillator, Long Grains, and Tape. Grain Oscillator, Long Grains, Tape. And each one of them treats your sample that you have loaded in a different manner, and it can be quite drastic in how it treats it. So it's if you're a sound designer or you're whatever you're doing with a sample, it pays to just, even if you don't go in and tweak all of the different pieces, just plug in each one of these to your sample so you can see what it does every time. So I have this loaded. We'll do it as a one shot. And we'll do it as a one shot with a freeze at the end. How's that sound? We'll slow it down a little. All right, so Spectral Grains. Let's see, what does Spectral Grains get me on this pitch? And you know, the grains, what's referred to as the grains, is the sample's chopped up into little pieces, and then the pieces are overlapping to a certain degree or not. And that's what you're hearing, and it's stretching out those pieces, or putting space between them, or putting space between space, or subdividing that piece of that sample to make it longer and longer. There's it's an algorithm, and each one of them is different. So watch the little lines there as we play with the snap. You see it's harmonic snap. So what is snap doing? It's moving the inharmonic partials closer to the harmonic partials. And when you get to 100%, it's removed all of the inharmonic partials. Let's look at it through an analyzer. All right, so this is the Melda audio analyzer, and let's watch it work. So you can see your existing partials. You see them changing. You can see them going away. And then there we go. We've removed all the in-between stuff, which is really the harmonic richness. So it's going to treat every sample differently because it's weird, man. It's weird. It's kind of it's even hard for me to explain it. And rather than go into a hour-long diatribe about harmonic partials and which ones are the important ones, and it's got to figure out based on the algorithm, the root of the note and what partials are harmonic with it. I'm going to just say play with that. If you're using the Spectral Grains algorithm, then just play with the snap and do it to taste and see what you think. And you can see the filter just cuts them out. Instead of merging them, it's slowly, oh, they're getting quieter, they're going away. Until all we have is basic. And every time, like I was saying with the algorithm, how it's figuring out what the harmonics and inharmonics are, FFT size is the frequency detection. So faster or slower. And that's going to affect your processing power. And it's affecting my processing power now. My buffer's having an issue. So if you wanted to do a better job detecting your partials, then you can boost this FFT size. And when it's the fastest, it leaves out the low end. This is all according to the reason manual on that one. You just take their word for it. They know what they're talking about. The formant. And keyboard knob. That keyboard knob does what most keyboard knobs do on synthesizers. When you turn it all the way down, every note is the same. It does. So if your concern is, if you're messing with drums, then that's where you turn your keyboard down all the way, and that way you don't get a different pitch. You can hit every note and get the same pitch. Tuning the formant. And then form or formant. And you're obviously you're retuning the sample. All right, so we're gonna leave that alone. Now, curve. What do you do? Oh, that hurt. Surprise! What if we do this? Huh, well, what if we do this? Are you getting an idea of what it does? So yeah, it accents, you're drawing your own EQ curve to what it's playing back. So if I do all low end, then I get all low end. If I do high end, it's like I got my own, it's not like I have my own EQ built into it right there. It's not, maybe not doing it exactly the same way a regular EQ would, but that's what's going on. And then the curve, you can turn that on and off, obviously. And then you have the option to use it less or more. So we do an extreme curve. All right, we're all low end, and then so I'm like, okay, I don't want it that mute, I don't want it that thuddy, so I'll back off a little bit. But it's still the same thing without having to redraw the deal. And that's automatable, so it could have some fun with that one. So that's that little section for spectral gains. And each one of these has the option for pitch. So I'm not going to cover this every time. We're just gonna mention it here so you know. So in Spectral Gains, you have to have snap and filter on for pitch to work. But it's this, this is the same thing that it would do with any other synthesizer. So you got octaves, you got semitones, you got synths, and then keyboard, which again does the same thing that the other keyboard knob does. If you want the keyboard to have no effect, turn this to 0. Every key on the keyboard plays the same note. And that's your Spectral Gains in a nutshell. We could definitely go deeper, but we're going to stop there because we got 3 more. Grain Oscillator. So Grain Oscillator, different algorithm, some similar ideas. It's still working on, grains and pieces. The Spectral Grains is operating from a point of view of harmonics. The Grain Oscillator is a different point of view. In the Grain Oscillator, your grain length and grain spacing is affecting the timbre of the sample as opposed to the pitch. So it's a different algorithm. It's affecting it in a different way. You don't necessarily have to know the science behind it to enjoy it. But let's look and see, what does everything do here? So pan spread. I hope it does something with pan. I think it does. It's like it's panning out. Yes. Pitch jitter. You think it's gonna jitter the pitch? Almost noise when you get it at the max. And this would be one where, depending on the sample, you might get a very different effect. So I changed my sample there, pitch jitter. Slow it down. Now if we change the grain spacing, and you hear it's like stretching. We'll turn the oscillator off. So to taste. It's adding little whispers underneath there. All right, grain length. I think is fairly self-explanatory. I mean, so grain length and grain spacing go hand in hand, right? Grain spacing, the amount of space between the grains is. And then grain length, you can see the overlap. And what does the original sample sound like? Like that. So truest to the original there, about 50%. And it's crossfading each sample. So once you reach a certain point, you can see by that tiny little diagram the crossfade. You're getting more crossfade than you are sample at a certain point there. And then the more samples you have, the more crossfading you have. So it starts you get more noise in the sample. Hopefully that makes sense to you. And just like the Spectral Grain algorithm, you have a formant option, and then obviously that plays with pitch, tuning, plays with tuning. And then keyboard does the same thing as it does in the last one. All right, let's check out long grains. Long grains. So as the name would imply, long grains, longer segments, longer samples than the grain oscillator. Longer chunks. So pan spread. I was going to say it's a different thing. No, it does the same thing. It's panning. Just depending on your grain, you get some interesting effects there in stereo. Mono. And then pitch jitter, same thing. We'll slow the speed down here. And so note that effect. And you get that stretching effect with no jitter. And then as soon as we kick that jitter in, even though we can't really see the jitter, it's happening, and it's turning, you're getting kind of a chorus effect. It's turning it into a more playable instrument, or at least in my head it is. So grain length, so similar to the grain oscillator, you can see the overlap increase. And since these are longer samples, you get, I guess, truer to the original, I'm gonna say. But when it gets, to me it gets faker, worse, whatever, when you make them shorter. Until you make them long. And then you get that stretching effect. So then the next piece that can affect that is your rate. So this, again, space between. And you can literally hear the space between. So chop it. So it's one of those where there's like a butter zone for everything, and then the crossfade does what you expect it to do. And all of those are automatable. That is the long grain. Now tape. Is fun. So your loop crossfade. Let's go here. So there's no crossfade. So you can see what the crossfade is doing. And it's like it's playing a actual piece of tape, if you will. And then your speed controls the speed of the playback. So there's that tape stop we were talking about before. So it's a fun one. It's a cool effect. You can do some neat stuff with it. But that's tape in a nutshell. There's not a whole lot to that one, other than, you know, you can kind of, it's sort of like play with it to tape. So check out tape. Real quick, just because we hadn't talked about it, there is an oscillator here. And you've got just a handful of waveforms. And then you have a mod option. So if you're playing with a sample or you want to add a tone to a sample that maybe is toneless, then that's your boy right there. And this would be a good example because I've lowered this so much, but it allows you to keep playing with that sample and treat it more like an instrument. So just so you can see what mod does. So it's a filter sweep. Also automatable. High pass until it cuts it off entirely in the case of square wave. Noise. And that's it. So those are the playback algorithms. And the next episode we will wrap it all together. We'll mention the back real quick, and that will be the complete walkthrough of the grain sample manipulator synthesizer. Thanks for watching. See you then. Cheers.